There's a moment that arrives quietly, without announcement. It doesn't come with fireworks or a sign from the sky. No applause, no grand epiphany, just a silence, a pause, a heartbeat between the life you've lived for others and the life that's been waiting for you to claim. You feel it when you wake up one morning, and the things that used to excite you now feel foreign. You feel it when your reflection looks at you, not with judgment, but with a question. Is this the life I came here to live? Not the one they expect from you, not the one that pleases the crowd, but the one that feels like home in your bones. That's the real turning point, the sacred split. The moment you finally begin to choose yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also knew how rare that choice is, because we've been taught to perform, not to live. We've been taught that sacrifice is noble, that pleasing others is moral, that putting ourselves first is selfish. So we become masters of accommodation, bending ourselves to fit the room, reshaping our edges so no one else feels discomfort. And we call it kindness. We call it responsibility. But deep down, we know what it is: self-abandonment disguised as virtue. The world you live in is not neutral. It is built to distract you from your center. Every ad, every scrolling feed, every subtle pressure nudges you away from yourself and towards some version of success that feels shiny on the surface but hollow underneath. You were not born to be a product. You were not born to fit into someone else's timeline. But you've spent years trying to be good. Good enough, smart enough, attractive enough, successful enough, hoping that if you just hit all the right marks, you'll finally be worthy. And maybe for a moment, you fooled them. Maybe you even fooled yourself. But now you're here, with that still, aching truth in your chest. Something inside me has been whispering for a long time, and I can't keep ignoring it. Choosing yourself isn't about being selfish. It's about refusing to betray your soul. It's about recognizing that you're not here to perform your life. You're here to live it. You're not here to be the version of yourself that's easy to digest or convenient to love. You're here to be whole. And wholeness has nothing to do with perfection. It has everything to do with honesty, with courage. Finally saying, no more masks, no more pretending, no more sacrificing myself for a seat at a table I don't even belong to. And here's the wild, beautiful truth they never tell you. When you truly choose yourself, when you stop apologizing for your needs, stop shrinking your voice, stop making yourself small so others can feel big, the world doesn't collapse. It rearranges. The relationships that were built on your silence start to fall away. And yes, it hurts, but it's not destruction. It's alignment. It's the clearing of the false so the true can enter. You might lose people. You might disappoint them. You might walk away from jobs, communities, even identities that once defined you. But the only thing you're losing is the illusion. The script you inherited but never wrote. The role you played so well, you forgot it was theater. And in that quiet aftermath, something remarkable begins to happen. Life starts meeting you where you are, not where you pretend to be. The invitations you used to chase now find you. The doors you kept knocking on finally open because you stopped trying to be who you weren't and started embodying who you are. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming yourself, not your ego, not your title, not your trauma, but the totality of your being. And it is not an easy road. It requires radical honesty, It asks you to leave behind everything that was safe but false, to grieve the version of you that was loved for the wrong reasons, to say goodbye to the comfort of being needed, chosen, and validated by a world that never really saw you. Choosing yourself means standing in the fire of your truth without needing anyone else to agree with it. It means letting go of the illusion that love requires you to abandon yourself. It means finally, fully, unapologetically taking up space in your own life. Most people won't understand this at first, because most people are still playing their roles. They will say, "You've changed," that you're cold now, distant, selfish. But what they mean is, "You've stopped being who I need you to be for me to stay comfortable." And that's okay. Let them say it. Let them misunderstand you. Because the only people who will truly belong in your life are the ones who can love you in your wholeness, not your compliance. You don't need everyone to get it. You only need to get it yourself. And once you do, something sacred shifts. You begin to attract differently. You no longer resonate with the anxious pull of people who feed off your self-doubt. You no longer feel magnetized to environments where you have to earn your right to belong. You start to feel at peace in your solitude. You begin to feel safe in your own body. You start to trust that the life meant for you won't require you to betray yourself to have it. And that kind of trust, that kind of inner stability, it becomes your compass, your sanctuary, your source of strength. Because now you're no longer navigating the world based on fear. You're moving from alignment, from presence, from truth. Let's be honest, choosing yourself will cost you, but so does abandoning yourself. And only one of those choices leads to freedom. Only one of them ends the cycle of resentment, exhaustion, and quiet self-betrayal that has been eroding your spirit. You don't need another year of trying to be who you're not. You don't need another relationship that requires you to tone yourself down. You don't need another goal that was never yours to begin with. You need a return, a reconnection, a rewilding, a reclamation of everything you are when no one is looking and no one is applauding. And that starts with one choice. Choose yourself, not in defiance, but in reverence, not as rejection of others, but as a devotion to your soul. This is the beginning, not of selfishness, but of sacred alignment, not of arrogance, but of authenticity. You are not here to live a life that makes sense to everyone else. You are here to live a life that feels true to you. And when you do, when you finally choose yourself above the noise, above the fear, above the expectations, they will call it rebellion. But you will know it for what it truly is: liberation. So the next time your inner voice whispers, the next time your soul tugs at your chest, don't silence it. Don't second guess it. Listen, trust it, follow it, because that voice is not your weakness. It's not your illusion. It's your truest guide. And it is not leading you away from life. It is leading you back to yourself, back to the version of you that never needed to be fixed, just remembered. And once you remember, once you return, you will see that nothing around you stays the same. The world changes when you do. And it begins with one quiet, radical act of courage. You choose you. It doesn't speak in sentences. It doesn't shout. It doesn't write you an email or tap you on the shoulder. Intuition doesn't argue. It doesn't justify itself. It simply knows. And if you're quiet enough, brave enough, and honest enough, you'll hear it. That subtle nudge. That ache in your stomach when something feels off. That calm certainty when everything around you is chaos, but something in you just knows. Not because it makes sense, not because it's logical, but because your soul has never needed a reason to recognize what is true. Carl Jung didn't talk about intuition as some mystical gift reserved for a few. He saw it as an inherent faculty of the psyche, a natural intelligence of the unconscious that communicates through symbols, feelings, dreams, and inner resonance. And yet, most of us ignore it. Not because we don't have it, but because we've been taught not to trust it. We've been trained from childhood to look outward for answers, to trust authority over instinct, to ask permission before we move, to collect facts, seek validation, and follow the rules. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that the voice within us was too vague, too emotional, too irrational to be trusted. So we silenced it. We tuned it out. We called it weakness. And in doing so, we exiled the very compass that was meant to guide us through the wilderness of life. But intuition doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It waits, patiently, quietly, until you're ready to return. It shows up as restlessness, as a feeling that something is missing, even when nothing appears wrong. It whispers through synchronicities, those strange coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. It speaks in your dreams, your impulses, your deep sense of knowing. But most of all, it speaks in the places where logic fails. When the job checks all the boxes but leaves you empty. When the relationship looks good on paper but feels like a slow suffocation. When the plan you've worked so hard to build starts to collapse under the weight of your denial. That's when intuition rises, not to punish, but to liberate. Because here's what most people don't understand. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign that something's broken. It's a sign that something's waking up. Intuition isn't comfortable. It rarely leads you down the easy path. It often disrupts everything you've built, because what you've built wasn't made for the real you. It was made for the mask you wore to survive. And now that you're ready to live, not just survive, that mask has to fall. That's the real reason we ignore our intuition. Not because we can't hear it, but because we're terrified of what it might ask us to do. Leave. Speak. Let go. Say no. Start over. All things that risk our comfort, our identity, our reputation. But what's the cost of not listening? A life that looks good, but feels wrong. A life filled with accomplishments, but void of aliveness. A life where every decision feels like a betrayal, because deep down, you know you're not where you're meant to be. Jung believed that intuition is the doorway to the self, not the surface self, the one that plays roles and fits in, but the capital S self, the core of your being that holds your deepest truth. And the truth isn't something you can think your way into. You have to feel it, sense it, remember it, and most importantly, trust it. Trust. That's the real leap, isn't it? To trust your body when it tightens in the presence of the wrong person. To trust your energy when it rises around a new idea. To trust your sadness when it tells you you've outgrown something. To trust your desire, not as something to be ashamed of, but as sacred guidance. To trust that your path, though unclear, is unfolding in its own strange, divine rhythm. That the next step will appear when you're ready to take it. You don't need to know the whole journey to take the first step. We live in a culture obsessed with certainty, with plans, with guarantees. But the soul doesn't operate in straight lines. It moves in spirals. It leads you not with blueprints, but with breadcrumbs. It doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't care about your 5-year plan. It cares about your alignment, your joy, your peace, your wholeness. And sometimes, to reclaim those things, you have to let go of everything you thought you were supposed to want. The mind will fight this. It will say, be reasonable. It will scream, this doesn't make sense. It will point to all the reasons why you should stay where it's safe. But intuition isn't interested in safety. It's interested in truth. And truth, though liberating, is often terrifying. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I regret it? What if I disappoint everyone? These are not signs that your intuition is wrong. These are signs that your conditioning is unraveling, that your need for control is being loosened, that you're stepping into the unknown, where transformation lives. Because here's what happens when you start living intuitively. Life begins to flow, not perfectly, not without obstacles, but with a kind of grace that logic could never manufacture. You begin to meet the right people. You stumble into the right opportunities. You're guided, not pushed, pulled, not pressured. It's not that life gets easier, it's that it gets truer. And in that truth, you find a strength that doesn't need proof, a knowing that doesn't need validation. People will ask you how you knew, how you dared to walk away, how you trusted that this was the right move. And you won't have a spreadsheet to show them. You won't have a 10-step plan. You'll just have a quiet smile and the kind of peace that comes from finally listening to the one voice that always told you the truth, your own. That's what makes intuitive living so radical in today's world. It puts your inner authority above every external voice. It frees you from the tyranny of shoulds. It calls you out of the crowd and into your rhythm. And that rhythm, it's not chaotic. It's not random. It's deeply intelligent because it comes from the part of you that's connected to something far bigger than you. The collective unconscious, as Jung called it, the timeless wisdom of the psyche, the primal memory of the soul. You don't have to become someone else to access it. You just have to remember who you were before you forgot, before they told you who to be, before fear taught you to compromise, before the world convinced you that logic was more valuable than intuition. You knew. You always knew, and you still do. Beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the endless busyness, you still know. So start there, not with answers, but with listening, not with certainty, but with curiosity, not with control, but with openness. Start noticing how your body feels around certain people. Start paying attention to what energizes you and what drains you. Start honoring the quiet tug that says, there's something more. Because there is. There always has been. And it's waiting for you on the other side of your trust. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that no amount of intellect could substitute for a felt sense of truth. He knew that real transformation doesn't happen through information. It happens through integration, through courage, through alignment, through a decision to trust the whisper over the shout, the feeling over the fact, the knowing over the noise. This is not reckless. It is sacred. It is not irresponsible. It is revolutionary. In a world that conditions you to betray yourself 100 times a day, choosing to trust your intuition is the ultimate rebellion. It's how you come home, not to the life you were told to live, but to the life that has been quietly calling you all along. And once you start living this way, once you begin to follow that subtle, steady voice within, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop forcing. You stop contorting yourself to fit places you've outgrown. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to prove their worth because you've already remembered it. You walk with a kind of peace that doesn't need defending. You move with a kind of clarity that doesn't need explanation. And you live with a kind of trust that makes the impossible feel natural. That is the power of intuition. That is the gift of coming home to yourself, not through logic, not through striving, but through listening, through feeling, through choosing again and again to trust the one voice that never lied to you, your own. You've been taught to fear it, to run from it, to bury it beneath smiles, small talk, and well-rehearsed roles. The anger, the envy, the neediness, the shame, the judgment, the bitterness, the parts of you that don't fit the picture of who you're supposed to be. You lock them away. You pretend they don't exist. You tell yourself you've evolved past them, but they're still there, waiting, watching, growing in the dark, not to destroy you, but to wake you up. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious repository of everything you've rejected, disowned, and denied about yourself. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. The shadow isn't your flaw. It's your mirror. It's not a curse. It's a compass. It shows you where you're fragmented, where you've betrayed yourself to belong, where your soul has been trying to get your attention. Every time you snap at someone and don't know why, every time you sabotage something good, every time you're triggered by someone else's confidence, success, or freedom, that's not weakness. That's the shadow knocking. Not to hurt you, but to help you heal. But instead of listening, we suppress. We project. We judge others for what we refuse to see in ourselves. We call them arrogant when really we're afraid of owning our power. We call them selfish when deep down we resent how often we've abandoned ourselves. We despise in others what we've been taught to exile in ourselves. And this is how we stay stuck, not because we're broken, but because we refuse to look at what's underneath. But here's what Jung discovered, and what most people never dare to realize. The shadow holds your gold. The anger you repress, it's a signal that your boundaries have been violated. The jealousy you deny, it's a clue to your unlived potential. The sadness you mask, it's the grief of all the times you said yes when you meant no. Your shadow isn't the enemy. It's your roadmap to wholeness. Yet most people spend their entire lives avoiding this work because it's not easy. It's not glamorous. Shadow work requires you to sit in the fire of your contradictions, to admit that even the most spiritual among us carry rage, that even the most successful feel shame, that even the most healed still carry wounds. And that's the paradox. The moment you stop pretending to be perfect is the moment you begin to become whole. You were not put here to be polished. You were put here to be real. And to be real means to be willing to see yourself, all of yourself. Not just the parts that are lovable, but the inconvenient parts. The parts that don't get applause. The parts you were told were too much, too sensitive, too angry, too intense. But those parts, they're not mistakes. They are parts of your power that have been forced underground. The truth is, we've been conditioned to perform emotional hygiene, to keep our darkness out of sight, to act like everything's okay. But Jung knew that what we bury doesn't die. It festers. It shapes our reality in unconscious ways. It seeps into our relationships, our choices, our self-worth. You can't outrun what you refuse to face. You can only keep living in circles until you decide to stop and look within. And when you do, when you finally dare to enter the cave of your own denied self, you discover something breathtaking. Your shadow is not a monster. It's a misunderstood part of your soul. It doesn't want to ruin you. It wants to be integrated. It wants to be accepted. And the moment you stop fighting it, it stops fighting you. Imagine what would happen if you stopped apologizing for your anger and started listening to what it's trying to protect. If you stopped numbing your sadness and began honoring the losses you never grieved. If you stopped suppressing your truth just to keep the peace and started letting it guide your path instead. That's not weakness. That's a strength. That's power. That's the alchemy of the shadow. The more you hide from yourself, the more exhausted you become. Not because life is hard, but because self-rejection is heavy. Carrying the weight of who you're not, just to be accepted, is the heaviest burden of all. But there is another way. Not by fixing yourself, but by facing yourself. Not by becoming better, but by becoming whole. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim your soul, piece by piece. It means taking back the parts of yourself that you gave away to be liked. It means seeing your triggers not as failures, but as invitations. It means choosing curiosity over shame, compassion over judgment, truth over image. And that choice, it's revolutionary. Because when you make peace with your shadow, you become untouchable. You're no longer manipulated by guilt. You're no longer driven by fear. You're no longer controlled by the opinions of people who only knew your mask. You stand rooted, not in perfection, but in truth. This is what true confidence feels like. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need to dominate or defend. The kind that comes from knowing you've faced your darkness and found your light. The kind that comes from realizing your worth was never dependent on being flawless. It was always about being fully you. But be warned, this path will cost you your illusions. You'll have to give up the fantasy that healing means always feeling good. That being spiritual means being calm all the time. That self-love is a bubble bath and not a reckoning. Real self-love is choosing to love the parts of you that no one claps for. Real healing is learning to sit with the discomfort until it reveals its wisdom. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's the real work, not bypassing, not fixing, but witnessing, holding, embracing. Loving what you've been told is unlovable. That's what transforms you. Because once you've embraced your shadow, no one can use it against you. Once you've reclaimed your rage, you're no longer afraid of conflict. Once you've faced your shame, you stop letting it choose your partners, your careers, your future. You become free. Not because your past disappears, but because it no longer controls you. You start to live differently. You speak with more clarity. You stop over-explaining. You start choosing what feels right, even if it doesn't make sense to others. You stop chasing validation and start honoring your energy. You say no when you mean no. You say yes when it lights you up. You stop being available to everything that drains you, not because you're cold, but because you're conscious. This is the power of shadow integration. It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you whole. It doesn't erase your darkness. It teaches you how to dance with it. It doesn't fix your wounds. It makes them sacred. You don't have to do this all at once. You don't have to descend into the depths overnight. Start small. Notice your triggers. Track your patterns. Get curious about your projections. Pay attention to the emotions you judge in others and ask what they might be reflecting to you. Meet yourself in the places you've been avoiding, not with punishment, with presence. And when the shame rises, and it will, don't look away. Sit with it. Breathe through it. Ask it what it wants you to see. Ask what it's been protecting. There is always a gift hidden underneath. You are not broken. You are layered. You are not flawed. You are fragmented. And the work is not to eliminate those fragments, but to bring them home. So don't be afraid of your darkness. It's not your enemy. It's your oldest teacher. The one that's been waiting for you to stop running and start remembering. The one that carries your fire, your truth, your freedom. And when you finally choose to meet it, not with fear, but with reverence, something incredible happens. You begin to feel whole, not perfect, not polished, but real, grounded, alive. And in that aliveness, you reclaim your voice, your power, yourself. This is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of something sacred, something deeper than healing, something more powerful than change, a homecoming to all of you, especially the parts you thought you had to hide to be loved. There comes a time when everything around you begins to feel off. The job you once chased starts to feel empty. The relationship that once gave you comfort now feels confining. The version of yourself you worked so hard to build no longer feels like it belongs to you. You walk through your days, going through the motions, smiling at the right moments, doing what's expected. But underneath it all, there's a quiet ache, a sense that something doesn't fit anymore, that somehow, without meaning to, you've outgrown your own life. And that feeling, that unshakable tension between who you've been and who you're becoming, it's not a mistake. It's not depression. It's not failure. It's your soul preparing you for rebirth. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He called it the midway point in the journey of individuation, a sacred rupture, a moment of transition between the known and the unknown. He wrote that to be born into your true self, your false self must die. And that death doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, quietly, in the form of restlessness, of discontent, of things falling apart, no matter how tightly you try to hold them together. The life you built, the one that was shaped by who you were, what you feared, what you thought you needed to survive, begins to crack. The things you once tolerated start to drain you. The people you once fit in with now leave you feeling invisible. And the goals that once felt urgent now seem irrelevant. You might not even recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. Not because you've lost yourself, but because you're finally shedding the layers that were never really you. This is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. But our culture doesn't know how to hold this kind of sacred unraveling. We're taught to chase clarity, to push through, to medicate the discomfort, to keep performing even when our spirit is collapsing beneath the surface. We fear this space in between, Because it doesn't come with a map. It doesn't come with certainty. It doesn't offer instant answers or neat resolutions. It's a liminal space, a spiritual cocoon, and everything inside of you wants to run because it feels like a loss. The loss of identity, the loss of direction, the loss of the life you thought you wanted. And grief shows up in unexpected ways. You might feel angry, confused, numb, and exhausted. You might question everything: your past, your relationships, your purpose, your worth. But that's not weakness. That's what it looks like when the old self begins to dissolve. And here's the secret no one tells you. The dissolution is divine. Because when your old life no longer fits, it's because something truer is trying to take its place. Your soul doesn't destroy, it transforms. It clears away what no longer serves, so it can make space for what does. It's not punishing you. It's inviting you into alignment, into truth, in depth. But it can't bring you there unless you're willing to let go of what's already dead. Letting go is hard, especially when your identity has been woven into your job title, your relationship, your image, and your routines. Especially when the world praises you for being who you're not. When you've received love, attention, and safety for performing a role that now feels unbearable. The mind clings to the familiar. Even when it hurts, it whispers, "Stay here." At least you know this pain. At least you know how to survive it. But your soul wants more than survival. It wants the truth. It wants expansion. It wants to breathe. Jung wrote that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. And many of us are still carrying that weight, living the lives our parents wish they had lived, pursuing dreams we inherited, not created, holding on to stories about success, love, and worthiness that were never ours to begin with. So, of course, it feels terrifying to let go. Because letting go doesn't just mean walking away from the job or the relationship. It means walking away from the person you became to earn love. It means stepping into the unknown without a guarantee. It means trusting a future you can't yet see because your soul feels it coming. And here's the truth. If you don't honor this inner calling, life will do it for you. Things will start falling apart. Doors will close. People will leave. Opportunities will dry up. Not as punishment, but as redirection. The longer you stay in the wrong life, the more your soul will rebel. Through anxiety, through exhaustion, through illness, through unbearable boredom. Your inner world will start screaming, "This is not who I am." And if you're listening, really listening, you'll realize that what feels like falling apart is falling into place. Because rebirth isn't clean. It's messy. It's disorienting. It's full of grief and uncertainty. But it's also full of possibility, of potential, of sacred space for something new to emerge. This is what the ancient myths always taught: the descent before the ascent, the night before the dawn. You must first die to who you thought you were before you can rise into who you are. This death and rebirth cycle is not a one-time event. It's a rhythm, a pattern, a sacred spiral. Every time you evolve, you will face another unraveling, another initiation, another letting go. And every time you will be asked, are you willing to release what no longer fits to become who you were always meant to be? Most people say no. They cling, they compromise, they settle, and their souls grow quiet. But you? If you're here, reading this, feeling that deep resonance in your chest, you are not most people. You are ready to say yes. Yes to the ending. Yes to the grief. Yes to the unknown. Because you've tasted the alternative, and you know in your bones, staying small hurts more than growing. So how do you navigate this sacred in-between? You surrender, not to weakness, but to wisdom. You stop forcing. You let things fall. You listen. You feel. You rest. You stop trying to fix what's not yours to carry. You stop trying to explain your evolution to people who were only meant to know your past. You trust the quiet inner voice that says, this ending is not the end. It's the opening. Permit yourself to grieve the old life, even if it looked good on the outside. Even if others don't understand. Even if you can't fully explain why it no longer feels right. Give yourself grace for not having all the answers. You're not supposed to. You're not here to rush through the cocoon. You're here to transform inside it. You are in the sacred in-between, the place where nothing makes sense, and yet everything feels inevitable, where the old rules no longer apply, and the new ones haven't been written yet. This is not a detour. This is the path, and it is holy. You don't have to know what's next. You only have to honor what no longer fits. You only have to keep choosing truth over comfort, trust over fear, depth over performance, because eventually the fog will lift, the clarity will come, the pieces will rearrange, and one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and realize, I'm no longer surviving. I'm alive. I'm no longer faking peace. I am at peace. I'm no longer pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm standing in the truth of who I've become. And you'll look back at this time, not with regret, but with reverence. Because it was in this season of unraveling that you came home to yourself. Not the self you performed, but the self you reclaimed. Not the life you built from fear, but the one you allowed to emerge from trust. This is the sacred threshold, the place where the old you dies and the real you begins to rise. And when you cross it, something irreversible happens. You will never again fit into spaces that require you to abandon yourself. You will never again tolerate a life that feels too small for your soul. You will no longer chase what you were never meant to carry. Because now you know. When the old life no longer fits, you're not lost. You're becoming. You've been told your whole life that putting yourself first is selfish, that prioritizing your own needs is somehow a betrayal, that good people give without question, that strong people push through, hold it together, carry everyone else even as they're falling apart. You were praised when you made yourself small, rewarded when you sacrificed, celebrated when you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. And somewhere along the way, you started believing it. That love meant losing yourself. That kindness meant abandoning yourself. That being worthy meant never being a burden. But what if that story was never true? What if choosing yourself isn't selfish, but sacred? What if self-respect isn't rebellion, but the foundation of real connection? What if loving yourself fully is the one thing that makes all other love possible? Carl Jung knew this. He understood that without self-respect, every relationship becomes a performance, a trade, a quiet agreement to betray who you are so someone else can stay comfortable. And slowly, silently, that performance starts to cost you everything. Your joy, your voice, your sense of belonging in your own life. Until one day, you wake up surrounded by people, obligations, and roles that look nothing like who you truly are. And this is the moment. the breaking point, the reckoning, the silent scream that asks you to choose, to keep performing or to start living, to keep sacrificing or to start honoring, to keep proving or to finally pause and ask, what do I need? What do I want? Who am I without the masks? That choice is not easy, especially when you've been conditioned to equate love with obedience, especially when the world calls you too much the moment you stop silencing yourself, especially when the people who benefited from your self-abandonment start to call you selfish the moment you begin to say no. But hear this, choosing yourself isn't a rejection of others. It's a return to integrity. You're not saying, I don't care about you. You're saying, I refuse to abandon myself to keep you comfortable. You're not breaking trust. You're restoring it with the one person who has lived every second of your life, you. This isn't about ego. It's about essence. It's not about building walls. It's about honoring boundaries. It's not about running from responsibility. It's about refusing to carry what was never yours. Because when you choose yourself, you're not just protecting your peace. You're telling the truth. You're saying, I matter. My needs matter. My energy matters. My voice matters. And the moment you start living that truth, everything changes. Yes, some people will leave, but the ones who stay will see you. Not the mask, not the role, not the version of you they preferred, but you, the raw, real, radiant you. And they will love you, not because you're convenient, but because you're authentic. That's real love. That's soul-level connection. That's the kind of relationship you can build only after you stop shrinking. Jung believed that the greatest act of healing is individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, whole. And wholeness requires you to bring back every part of yourself you gave away for approval, every dream you dismissed, every boundary you crossed, every no you swallowed, every truth you buried just to be accepted. It requires you to forgive yourself, not for being wrong, but for surviving the only way you knew how. It requires you to look yourself in the mirror and say, I love you too much to keep living like this. I respect you too much to keep apologizing for your needs. I trust you enough to start again. That's not selfish. That's sacred. And it's not just about how you treat yourself. It's about the example you set for others. Every time you choose yourself, you permit others to do the same. Every time you walk away from what no longer aligns, you show others that peace is possible. Every time you speak your truth, you remind someone else that their voice matters too. You create a ripple, not by preaching, not by pushing, just by being. Because here's the secret most people don't know. When you honor yourself, the whole world responds. The energy you carry shifts. The boundaries you set realign your relationships. The standards you hold call in a different kind of love, a different kind of opportunity, a different kind of life, one that matches you. Not your mask, not your wounds, you. And yes, it takes courage. It takes unlearning. It takes walking away from the version of you that was praised for being easy to love, so you can become the version of you who is worthy of being known. Not tolerated, not needed, known, seen, loved in your fullness. You can't get there by people-pleasing. You can't find that by self-sacrificing. You can't feel whole while treating your own needs as optional. So let yourself become unfamiliar to the people who only loved your silence. Let yourself disappoint the expectations that were never yours to carry. Let yourself be misunderstood by those who don't yet know what self-respect looks like. You are not here to play a part. You are here to come alive. And aliveness doesn't come from saying yes to everything. It comes from saying yes to yourself, from listening to your body, from protecting your time, from honoring your energy, from walking away when your soul whispers, "This is no longer mine." Let this be the year you stop proving and start protecting, the year you stop overgiving and start receiving, the year you stop explaining your boundaries and start trusting them, the year you stop waiting for permission and start claiming your power. Because here's what they won't tell you. A life built on self-sacrifice will never bring you peace. Approval will never feel like love if it costs you your truth, and fitting in will never feel like belonging if it requires you to vanish. The only way to feel truly free is to choose yourself, fully, unapologetically, and consistently. Not just in the big moments, but in the daily ones. Every time you say no to what drains you, you say yes to your soul. Every time you rest instead of pushing, you honor your body. Every time you speak up instead of swallowing your words, you reclaim your voice. Every time you listen to your intuition instead of the noise, you return home to yourself. And slowly, piece by piece, you build a life that feels like yours. Not a life of performance, but a life of presence. Not a life of pretending, but a life of peace. Not a life of pressure, but a life of purpose. That's not selfish. That's sacred. Carl Jung didn't ask us to become someone new. He invited us to remember who we already are, to stop living for approval and start living from within, to honor the self, not the ego, not the image, but the deep, eternal self that knows exactly what we need. So take the risk. Choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's misunderstood, even when it shakes the foundation of the life you've built. Because what you'll find on the other side isn't isolation, it's liberation. Not loneliness, but alignment. Not ego, but essence. You are not here to earn your worth. You are here to embody it. You are not here to fit in. You are here to stand in your truth. You are not here to serve everyone else at the cost of yourself. You are here to serve the world through yourself by being who you truly are. So let this be the moment you stop shrinking and start rising. Let this be the moment you look at your reflection and say, I choose you. Not someday, not when it's convenient, not when everyone approves, but now, because you're worthy, because you've always been worthy. And when you live from that place, something sacred begins to unfold. You stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop bleeding for a love that never knew how to hold you. You start choosing. You start creating. You start becoming. And the world, sensing the shift, begins to rise with you. Because the moment you choose yourself, you're not just changing your life. You're changing what's possible for everyone who's been waiting for someone to go first. You will lose people. Let's start there. Not because you're broken, not because you did something wrong, but because healing shifts your frequency. Because clarity reorders your circles. Because when you begin to choose yourself, speak your truth, and honor your boundaries, something unspoken changes. The roles you used to play no longer feel natural. The dynamics you tolerated no longer feel sustainable. And the identities that once felt like home begin to suffocate you. So you let go. You walk away. Or sometimes, they walk away from you. And it hurts. Even when you know it's right, it still hurts. Because we're wired for belonging. We're taught that being good means being agreeable. That being loyal means staying, even when staying breaks you. That keeping the peace is more important than keeping your peace. But Carl Jung understood something most people avoid. Real growth requires rupture. Individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, demands separation from the persona, from the groupthink, from the roles that defined you. He knew that your path is yours alone, that the journey inward, while holy, is not always harmonious. So no, not everyone will clap for your transformation. Not everyone will celebrate your boundaries. Not everyone will understand the new version of you who no longer apologizes for taking up space. And they're not supposed to. Because the path back to your true self is a return to sovereignty, not consensus. At first, this can feel like loneliness, like exile, like walking through a forest at night with no one beside you. But that emptiness is not a void. It's a clearing, a sacred pause, a space where all that is false falls away. And in that space, you begin to hear your voice again, not the voice trained to please, but the one that whispers from the depths, "This is who I am." But here's the truth most people won't tell you. The moment you stop betraying yourself to belong, you stop belonging to places that require your betrayal. You stop fitting into rooms that reward your silence. You stop being palatable to people who depended on your compliance. You stop getting invited to tables where your authenticity makes others uncomfortable. And it can feel brutal, especially when the ones you lose are people you love. Especially when the places you no longer feel at home in are the ones you built your life around. But grief is part of the path. You grieve not only the people who leave, but the version of yourself who needed them. You grieve the stories you once believed. You grieve the safety of the known. But on the other side of that grief is something so much more honest, belonging without betrayal. Because when you belong to yourself, you no longer have to shapeshift. You no longer have to tolerate what drains you just to avoid discomfort. You no longer have to be half of yourself just to be accepted. And the people who truly see you, the ones who are meant for this new chapter, will find you not because you fit, but because you are real. Not because you please them, but because you reflect the truth. But you must walk through the in-between to get there. You must endure the silence between who you were and who you're becoming. You must stay rooted when your growth threatens other people's illusions. And you must learn to sit in the sacred discomfort of being misunderstood. That's the price of authenticity, and it's worth it. Because the truth is, you don't owe anyone the version of you they're most comfortable with. You don't owe anyone a watered-down version of your truth. You don't owe the world your silence just because your voice makes people question their own lives. What you do owe to yourself, to your soul, to the brief miracle of your existence is your wholeness. And wholeness means being able to hold your grief and your joy, your uncertainty and your clarity, your courage and your fear, You don't have to explain your process. You don't have to justify your decisions. You don't need a PowerPoint presentation to validate your evolution. You only need one thing: inner alignment. That is what makes you unshakable. Not being understood by everyone, but being true to yourself, even when you're not. Still, there will be moments of doubt. You'll question whether the loneliness is worth it, whether the loss is too much, whether maybe it would have been easier to just go back, to shrink again, to apologize again, to wear the mask a little longer. And in those moments, you will need to remember, your discomfort is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's proof that you're doing it differently. Because healing is not linear, and it's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's brutal. Sometimes it's rage. Sometimes it's numbness. Sometimes it's a long, empty quiet that makes you question everything. But it's all part of the process. The breakdown is not the opposite of the breakthrough. It's the bridge to it. And the more you trust that, the more you trust yourself, the less you need the world to understand. Because you begin to understand yourself. And that's enough. Eventually, the loneliness begins to lift. New people start to appear. People who speak your language, who honor your boundaries, who see your fullness and don't flinch. And it's not because you went looking for them. It's because your authenticity called them in. You stopped trying to earn love. You started becoming it. You stopped seeking permission. You started living from the truth. And the universe responds to truth. With synchronicities. With alignment. With moments that feel like, finally. Finally, I can breathe. Finally, I can rest. Finally, I can stop pretending. This is not the path for everyone, but it's yours. And the more you walk it, the more you realize. The pain of being misunderstood is temporary. The cost of being false lasts a lifetime. You don't have to convince anyone to come with you. You don't have to drag people along who don't want to grow. You don't have to water yourself down to be digestible. Let the ones who don't understand fall away. Let the versions of you who lived for their approval die. Let the silence speak what words cannot. Because in that silence, you will hear the truth. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. And not everyone will understand. But that's how you'll know you're doing it right. This journey is sacred. And it's yours. Not for validation, but for liberation. Not for applause, but for the truth. Not for perfection, but for wholeness. So walk your path. Let it unfold. Let it shed what no longer fits. Let it stretch you into someone deeper, freer, more fully alive. And know this: every step you take in the direction of your soul is a step toward a life that will not require you to abandon yourself to belong. The world may not always understand your journey, but your soul will. And that's all that ever mattered. You think you're alone, that no one understands what you're going through, that your path is too strange, too quiet, too different. Maybe you're broken because you no longer fit into a world that celebrates pretending. You sit in the silence, wondering if you've made a mistake. You question the pain, the disconnection, the losses. You wonder if you should have stayed where it was safe. It was predictable. Where you at least knew the rules, even if they weren't written for you. But what if I told you this? What you feel right now isn't isolation. It's initiation. not into loneliness, but into truth, not into despair, but into depth, not into exile, but into awakening. Because you are not alone. You never were. The moment you chose yourself, truly, deeply, unapologetically, you sent a signal out into the universe, a vibration, a frequency shift. And even though it may feel like the world has gone quiet, something ancient began to stir. People you haven't met yet began feeling it. Energies began moving. Old timelines began collapsing. New doors began forming. And somewhere, someone took their first breath of courage because you breathed yours. That's how this works. We don't heal in isolation. We heal in resonance. Carl Jung spoke often about the collective unconscious, a web of shared memory, meaning, and myth that connects all human beings beneath the surface. He believed that when one person dares to go inward, to face their shadows, to integrate their truth, it not only transforms their life, it transforms the field. Your healing sends ripples. Your courage lights torches. Your authenticity gives permission. And even though you may walk parts of this journey alone, you are never truly walking alone. There are others, right now, quietly waking up in their own lives, asking the same questions, feeling the same ache, wrestling with the same shadows. People who are no longer satisfied with survival. Who is tired of pretending? Who wants something real, something alive, something true? They may not post about it. They may not wear it on their sleeve, but they're there, craving a connection that doesn't require performance, longing for lives that don't cost them their souls, ready for conversations that go deeper than "I'm fine." And when they meet you, not the version of you that pleases, but the version that breathes, they will remember something they forgot, their truth. That's the power of choosing yourself. It doesn't just liberate you, it liberates others. Every time you speak from your heart, someone else finds the courage to silence their fear. Every time you walk away from what dishonors you, someone else realizes they can too. Every time you say no to what drains you, and yes to what lights you up, you give someone watching the strength to do the same. You don't have to start a movement. You just have to be moved. You don't have to change the whole world. You just have to stop betraying your own. Because your presence is enough. Your story is medicine. Your truth is a lighthouse. And someone, somewhere, is searching for exactly what you're embodying now. But let's be honest, the world you were raised in didn't teach you this. It taught you to hide, to adjust, to conform. It taught you that your truth was too heavy, too weird, too inconvenient. So you buried it. And in its place, you built a life that looked good but felt wrong. And when it all began to crack, when the roles felt empty and the masks stopped working, you thought something was wrong with you. But nothing was wrong. You were waking up. You were remembering. And that remembering is what the world needs most. Because we don't need more perfection. We need more presence. We don't need more experts. We need more honesty. We don't need more performance. We need more people willing to sit in the mess and still say, "I'm here. I'm real. I'm learning. I'm alive." Jung believed that the deepest transformation always begins with the individual. That is when one person reclaims their soul, it shifts the entire collective unconscious. This is not a poetic metaphor. It's an energetic law. You are not insignificant. You are not small. Your choices matter. Your boundaries matter. Your healing matters. Because every time you choose alignment over approval, every time you choose depth over distraction, every time you choose courage over comfort, you are building a new world. And it doesn't happen overnight. Some days, you'll feel like nothing's working. Some days, your progress will feel invisible. Some days, you'll want to give up and go back to what was easy. But stay the course. Not because it's always magical, but because it's yours. Not because it's always clear, but because it's true. Not because it makes everyone proud, but because it makes you whole. And wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. It means welcoming back every part of yourself you exiled to survive. It means choosing to love the mess and the miracle in equal measure. It means standing in your truth, even when your knees shake. Especially when your knees shake. Because in that trembling truth is where everything real begins. So if today you feel lost, misunderstood, disconnected, pause, breathe. Remember, you are not behind. You are not too late. You are not alone. You are right on time for your life. Right on time to begin again. Right on time to choose yourself. Right on time to realize that every step you've taken, every heartbreak, every shadow, every ending has been leading you here, to this moment, to this decision, to this quiet, radical act, to stop waiting for permission, to stop apologizing for your truth, to stop hiding in the shadows of who you used to be, and to finally say, with your whole being, I'm ready, I'm here, I'm enough. That one choice, it will echo into your relationships, into your work, into your body, into your breath, into your community, into the world. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing. Willing to show up. Willing to feel. Willing to risk being seen. Because when you do, something begins to shift. Not just inside you, but around you. The right people appear, the right doors open, the right path clear. Not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it, because you remembered. When I choose myself, I choose life, not survival. Life, not the version they told me to want, mine. And in choosing that, you offer the world a mirror. A glimpse of what's possible when someone stops performing and starts being. When someone stops striving and starts trusting. That's not a small thing. That's not a side effect. That's a revolution, and you're part of it. Every breath, every boundary, every brave, trembling yes to yourself, it all matters. So no matter what today looks like, no matter who gets it or who doesn't, no matter how far you think you still have to go, hold this truth close. You are not alone. You never were. And the more you choose yourself, the more you'll begin to see them. The ones who've been walking this path too. The ones who feel like home. The ones who reflect your truth to you. Not because they complete you, but because they remind you you were never broken. You were always becoming. And now, you're ready, not for a perfect life, but for a real one. Not for constant clarity, but for unwavering courage, not to be understood by everyone, but to understand yourself. And that is enough. That is everything. That is the beginning of a new world. A world that begins the moment you choose, truly choose, to be who you already are. So if this message stirred something inside you, if it echoed in the chambers of your soul, don't let it stop here. Let it ripple. Share this video with someone who's standing at the edge of themselves, someone who needs permission to begin again, someone who forgot that they are not alone. And if you haven't already, subscribe, not just for content, but for connection, for space, for truth, for the quiet courage we're building here together. Leave a comment. Tell me, what part of this journey spoke to your heart? What truth are you ready to honor in your life starting today? Every word you share matters. Every like, every share, every heartbeat behind a screen, it all adds fuel to this fire. A fire for those who are tired of pretending. A fire for those finally ready to remember who they are. Because this isn't just a video. This is a movement, a soft rebellion, a sacred return, and it begins with you. So take the step, speak your truth, choose yourself. And I'll see you in the next video. Where do we go deeper together?